Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cole. It's Sunday afternoon, December 1st. We haven't talked to you for a couple of weeks. We're back from Thanksgiving holiday now. And this will be the announcement for week 7 of Political Science 1013 on the 8-week schedule for the second half of the fall 2024 term. Okay, everybody. Looking at the schedule for the rest of the term, let me just go over it very quickly. We have Units 7 and 8 to cover for the final exam. Unit 7 on the Supreme Court, Unit 8 on Congress. Now, this Tuesday and Wednesday, the 3rd and 4th, we'll have our last discussion, and you're asked to read an interview with Senator Lankford, who will be, I suppose, the senator for most of us, since he's one of the two senators from Oklahoma. It has to do with the legislative work Senator Lankford tried to do on immigration. See if you approve of what he did or not. Okay, so lengthy article, interview with Senator Lankford from the New York Times that attracted a fair amount of comment, and we'll let you take a look at that and see what you think of it, and whether you approve of what Senator Lankford did here. Now, after that, everybody, term papers are due on the 12th. That is a week from this Thursday. And the final exam will be the 13th and 14th, Friday and Saturday for 48 hours. And grades then are due Monday the 16th. Now on the term paper, I've talked to a couple of people, corresponded with a couple of people via email about the term paper. Generally, I ask everybody to contact me 2 weeks before the due date, which is the 12th this term, but 2 weeks before that date was Thanksgiving Day. So I'm moving that ahead to this Monday the 2nd, which is the day most of you will be looking at this message. Okay. If you would like to do a term paper and you have not contacted me, please contact me by the end of the day Monday. Okay, we want to try to avoid last minute rush jobs with these. Okay. So you must contact me by Monday the 2nd, then the paper is due on Thursday the 12th. The final exam will be open for 48 hours on the 13th and 14th, okay, over Units 7 and 8 on the Supreme Court and Congress, plus 4 articles that you've been asked to look at online. Okay, and then grades will be turned in Monday the 16th. All right then, everybody, let me say just a few words about Unit 7 on the Supreme Court. We'll try to get started on Unit 8 on Congress, since it is a longer unit, and we'll finish up on that a week from today when we talk to you. Now, Unit 7 we talk about the federal court system in general very briefly. We concentrate on the Supreme Court. Just about all the cases the Supreme Court takes are on appeal from lower courts, maybe a lower federal court or a state Supreme Court. Among other things, it is our ultimate constitutional court with power to decide what is constitutional or not, what confirms with the Constitution or not. Remember, the Constitution trumps everything else. And so in our system, the Supreme Court has the power to rule on what's constitutional or not, and we call that the power of judicial review. And you'll see that concept discussed in the class notes, along with the concepts of activism and restraint. Be sure to pay attention to that. We talk a little bit about how the Supreme Court does its business, how it chooses what cases it's going to take. We introduce such terms as majority, dissenting, and concurring opinions. Be sure you're familiar with that. Okay. We talk a great deal about the politics of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is seriously caught up in politics because of perhaps primarily the abortion issue and other associated issues, perhaps. But the Supreme Court has become something of a political football, and the 9 seats on the Supreme Court have come to be considered a big prize for each party to win. And the justices are evaluated in terms of the party of the president that appointed them. It's almost like they're a legislature right now with 6 Republican appointees and 3 appointed by Democratic presidents. So often it'll be said that there's a 6-3 Republican majority on the Supreme Court, although all 9 of them would be pretty quick to tell you that they don't always divide along those lines, because they are, after all, a court, not a legislature, although we have come to think of them as something of a super legislature. Now, the process of nominating and confirming these people when vacancies occur and new justices have to be appointed and confirmed has become seriously acrimonious. Okay, and we look at a couple of sensational examples of that throughout the past generation and a half, going back to the attempted nomination of Judge Robert Bork during the Reagan administration. Okay. Clarence Thomas, quite a bit of controversy attending his nomination under the first President Bush. And more recently, the 3 that were nominated by President Trump during his first term, Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. Just like other branches of the government, it is possible to check and balance the Supreme Court. Some of the checks and balances are difficult to exercise and almost never have been exercised. We go through some of these in the class notes. Perhaps the easiest way to check and balance the Supreme Court is, when vacancies occur, appoint someone with views different than the justice they are replacing. And Trump has done this during his first term and has had quite a bit of influence over the 9 people on the court. He's appointed 3 of them now. Okay. So the politics of the Supreme Court are seriously fraught, although the justices on the court would insist they're a court, not a legislature, and are not supposed to work and make their decisions in exactly the same way that a legislature does. Nevertheless, we have come to think of it as kind of a mini legislature with a 6-3 Republican majority. So the politics of the Supreme Court is something very important, has had a big influence on our political system as a whole. We then go through several landmark decisions of the Supreme Court, going all the way back to the 1950s and the Brown versus Board of Education decision, which ended formal segregation in American public schools. More recently, just a couple of years ago, we've had the Dobbs decision over abortion that reversed the Roe versus Wade decision from almost 50 years earlier. And I've also tried to say a word or two about the recent decision from just a few months ago in Trump versus the United States, in which the Supreme Court severely limited the president's legal liability and gave him a considerable degree of immunity. Perhaps not total, but it's a decision that raised a number of eyebrows when it was handed down, and worth looking at the very end of that unit on the Supreme Court. All right, moving on to Unit 8 on Congress, and we'll try to finish this up next time. One thing we try to do is be sure that everybody knows who their representatives are. So we look at the senators for each of the 5 states in our area: Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico, and the House members from the districts that include the Panhandle and the areas of those other 4 states that surround it. And just about all our students should be able to figure out who their representatives in Congress are based on that. It is perhaps more important to know who your House member is than your senators, although it's important to know about all of them. But the House member has a very important role to play when it comes to constituent service and casework. And very often, if you have a problem with the federal government, your first point of contact will be through the office of your member of the House, your representative. We discuss the kind of people who run for and serve in Congress, whether they are a representative sample of the entire population. We mention that people generally run for Congress on their own initiative, without necessarily getting all that much help from the political party they seek to represent. That's one respect in which our political parties perhaps don't amount to as much anymore as they used to decades ago. One thing about members of the House of Representatives in particular, and I haven't seen the exact figures for the 2024 election, but for some time now, representatives, House members, have had a high degree of success at getting reelected. It is true that 50 or so of them will retire every 2 years. Sometimes they don't want to do it anymore. They may get appointed to another position in the federal government. They may run for higher office. They may want to run for governor or senator in their state. So typically there will be 50 or so of the House members who do not run for re-election, leaving maybe not quite 400 of them who do. But of those, typically 90% or more of them get re-elected. And generally they have a safe seat once they get in for a decade or more. Now, among the ways they do that, one important way of doing that, of course, is to curry favor with your constituents. And two important ways of doing that are what we call casework and pork barrel. Okay? Casework means services provided to an individual constituent, one at a time. You're going to get a message, or you should have already, that will direct you to Representative Lucas's website from Western Oklahoma, including the Panhandle. And he has instructions on that site on what to do, how to contact his office if you are having problems with an agency of the federal government. Okay. You could call pork barrel spending an example of doing that on a larger scale for the district as a whole, or maybe a county, town, or city within it, rather than just one constituent at a time. Pork barrel refers to spending projects that are included in the budget because one or more members want to take political credit for it. Okay, look at the taxpayer dollars that you paid that we brought back to your district. So casework and pork barrel are important ways of building support with your constituents, which tends to perpetuate their tenure in Congress for term after term after term. Now, what we'll talk about next time is the leadership positions in Congress, the committee system, and how a bill becomes law before we wind this up at the end of the second 8-week term here in the fall of 2024. So, please contact me no later than tomorrow, Monday the 2nd, if you would like to do a term paper. The term paper is due on Thursday the 12th. This Tuesday and Wednesday, the 3rd and 4th, we'll do our last discussion about Senator Lankford. The term paper is due on the 12th. The final exam will be the 13th and 14th. Grades are due the 16th. Okay, so we'll be talking to you one or two more times, at least one more time about a week from now, and maybe one more time after that just before the final exam. Study hard, take it easy, contact me with any questions, problems, or issues, and we'll talk to you once again a week from now at this time.